without further ado, we have our first guest speaker tonight. Brett Erickson co-leads in Redemption Community with the Merciers. And I was a part of the Redemption Grant Board, where we granted money to their RC to do what might be called a Bless Project, a project where they could use money to bless their neighbor. And so I heard the talk as a part of the Grant Board, and I've followed up with the RC, have heard the stories, and I'm really excited for them to share their story with you. So welcome up, Brett Erickson.
My name is Brett Erickson, and I'm really excited to be up here tonight, admittedly just as nervous. I've learned in preparing for this moment that 9 minutes goes by way quicker than you might imagine, so I'm going to dive right in. I'm here tonight, as Brian mentioned, to share the story of our Redemption community and a really neat partnership that we've entered into with Department of Child Safety. Department of Child Safety, or DCS, of course, is the state organization that runs and administers the foster care system in Arizona. If you're not aware, there's currently upwards of 18,000 children in Arizona alone that are in foster care in Arizona. Specifically, within DCS, there are what are called satellite offices around the state. In the Phoenix area alone, there's 20 of these satellite offices, and they serve a number of purposes. The first purpose, when a child is removed from his or her biological home, if they don't already have a permanent placement that awaits them, they're instead routed to a satellite office. And it's at this office where they're going to start to receive the care that they've been lacking in their biological home. Oftentimes they come in just awful circumstances. They have lice, for example, so they'll have that cleaned up. They'll receive a shower when maybe they haven't received a shower or a bath in days or if not weeks. They're going to receive a meal. Basically, they're going to spend the day in this satellite office while their case is being processed, and they're eventually put, hopefully by the end of the day, into their permanent placement with the family. The other purpose of a satellite office is once a child has received their permanent placement, they oftentimes will come back to the satellite office for what's called a supervised visit. So this is where they're going to meet with a case aide as well as their biological family. And the intent of that is for the case aide to just observe the behavior, interact with the child and the family, and basically provide parenting and coaching techniques to the family so they can work toward the goal, the ultimate goal of foster care, which is to reunify the child with his or her family. Our relationship, our Redemption Community's relationship with DCS really began 3 or 4 years ago when we had a member of our RC who was a close personal friend of a lady named Kimberly Barr. Kimberly is a program director of the Mesa Satellite Office at DCS, and the member of our RC just came to us and said, guys, I've got a friend, Kimberly, here's what she does, and she's got some needs that we could meet. And the needs were simple, and it was tangible. They were looking for household items that we may have in our garage or in our homes that we no longer had a need for, to donate those into the Mesa office for their annual yard sale. And what they do is they generate money through this yard sale to buy Christmas presents, buy Christmas presents, toys for children who have been placed through Mesa into foster care homes. And these homes they've been placed in may not have the financial resources to give these kids the Christmas that they deserve. So we understood the needs and we just said, how can we help? That's how the relationship began, and over the next couple of years it evolved. Our Redemption Community started making blankets for the Mesa office that the child would get to not only use during their time in the satellite office, but more importantly, take with them in their journey in foster care, just to have something they could call their own and something they could possess into their placement. Just growing closer to Kim, we began to really understand just the picture of what this looked like. These children often have been removed from their homes, and the same day, they show up on the doorstep of a complete stranger's house. And oftentimes, what few possessions they have were contained in a black garbage bag. So they would show up for their placement, there's not a lot of dignity in that. And that picture just really broke our heart as a group. And we just started thinking, and our involvement evolved to, God, what could we do to help that? So that evolved into the idea of backpacks. Rather than a child showing up with a garbage bag, what if we give each of these kiddos a backpack? Inside that backpack, let's put what we call a hygiene kit. Just a Ziploc bag with a bottle of water, maybe a chapstick, a stick of deodorant, shampoo, toothpaste, just the essentials, so they would just have a little more dignity in their journey of this confusing and scary foster care placement. The relationship evolved, and really it took off about a year ago when we as a group became aware of the Redemption Church grant process. And if you're not familiar, basically Redemption Church has a bucket of money that they reserve for its members to say, just come and put forth a proposal and share with us the phrase we see around campus, all of life is all for Jesus. What does that look like in your local ministry? What does that look like to you outside of the walls of Redemption Church? And how can you use this money to be the hands and feet of Christ? So we reached out to Kimberly and called her, and I'll share with you, it didn't take us more than 30 seconds to realize we, and more importantly, God could do some really neat things with some money that we didn't have up until that point in our relationship with Kimberly. Basically, we just said, Kimberly, without making promises or guarantees, how could you use this? And we went through the needs and what we could do. We went ahead with the grant, and for us, our vision of our grant was very simple, as this whole thing has really turned out to be for us. All of life is all for Jesus. For us and these foster care children just meant loving the least and loving the vulnerable and trying to make this awful day in these children's lives just a bit less awful. You know, we never had the misconception that we were going to change this and make this a happy day. I mean, that's not what it is, but if we can make their experience in the satellite office just a little bit less awful, that's what we were trying to do. Spoiler alert, I'm up here tonight, so we did receive a grant. We received a $5,000 grant from Redemption Church, and I wish I had more time to share what that grant has done, but I want to share just a few quick stories. Clothing. Before the grant, it was extremely rare when a child who was coming through the satellite office that day would need an article of clothing, and the DCS staff would have that specific size or even that specific gender available. We've purchased thousands of dollars of clothing so that Kimberly, our contact at DCS, has shared with us not one child has gone through the Mesa office this year and not received at least one new article of clothing. When we first went down and took a tour just to understand what the facility looked like, the shelving they had was inadequate. There wasn't a lot of it, so DCS members had to keep a lot of their donated items in their personal garages because they couldn't house it in the DCS office. What little shelving they had was old, it was warped, and it couldn't support a lot of weight. So we bought new shelving for a laundry room, we built new shelving, we installed new shelving, just in preparation for everything we were going to start to provide to DCS, to the satellite office. They'd have room to house it. Another picture that broke our hearts. When we were down there, just interacting with Kimberly and understanding the needs, we personally saw children, little infants crawling around, eating their snacks off the floor that we walk on, the dirty floor, and we looked around and realized they don't have high chairs. So something as simple as that, we purchased 2 high chairs for the DCS office just to guarantee that these children are at least going to get to eat their snack and eat a meal off a clean surface. It's not very complicated. Books and DVDs. The books that we saw had pages missing. They had covers torn off. DVDs were 30 years old, so we replenished their library and their collection of movies so that kids would have something more engaging, something more modern to watch while they're there. One of my favorite stories is games. When we started out, we talked to Kim and said, sure, we'll provide a couple $100 worth of games. The intent was simply to create an activity for the child to do while they were there. And as God often does, he took that and just our intent to give them something to do and used it for something way bigger than we had imagined. Those games have become instrumental, in Kimberly's words, during these supervised visits. When the parents are interacting with their child in a case aid, the case aid is witnessing the behaviors that I see in my house with my 3 kids, and if you have children, you probably see as well when you lose a game. And they're using that to provide coaching techniques to the families. As a result of that, and what Mesa now has, Kimberly has shared with us that case aides are now bringing children to this Mesa office from locations further away than Mesa. Instead of going to Tempe, instead of going to what would be their closest satellite office, they're using Mesa because of the tools this grant and God have been able to provide. My time is running out, so there's just 2 things I want to leave you with tonight. First of all, the foster care system can seem really complicated, and it often is, but getting involved does not have to be. There's nothing special about our redemption community. Our involvement began with a relationship that somebody had, listening and understanding what their needs were, and then when the opportunity presented itself, just raising our hand and saying, God, we're in. How can we help? The last thing I want to share, I think is going to be more impactful than anything I've said. This is from an email Kimberly sent to us a couple months after the grant began, and she just wanted to let us know the impact that this grant has had in her office. So this is in Kimberly's words. The backpacks are also beautiful as we place what little belongings the child may have in the backpack, so they are not headed off to what awaits them with what they own in a crumpled up Walmart bag or a garbage bag. It just helps send the child a message that their situation, while out of their control, is not their fault, and they are important, and they matter. Thank you.